The night her father sold her to the most feared mafia boss in the city, Serena thought she was being taken to her execution. Beaten, bruised, and barely able to breathe, she was dragged into Adrian Russo's mansion expecting the worst. But the man everyone called a monster did something no one else ever had. He asked who hurt her, and in that moment, everything changed. Because the man who bought her was about to destroy the man who sold her. This is not just a story about revenge. It is the beginning of a war born from one broken daughter and the ruthless king who chose to protect her.
Serena Vale understood that her life was a currency before it was a soul. Traded to settle a debt, she braced for the monster, Adrian Russo, to finish what her father started. But in the gloom of that first night, his eyes didn't search for a prize. They looked for a survivor. He recognized a humanity her father had spent years trying to erase. This wasn't her execution, it was a ghost story beginning to breathe. Stay close as this tragedy unfolds. Please like and share your city below. I want to know where these echoes land. That night, the rain bled down like ink over the city. Inside the Mercedes, every breath was a jagged reminder of her father's heavy hands. She stared at the neon blur outside, trying to dissolve into the glass. If she could just disappear into the watercolor lights, she wouldn't have to face the purple stains blooming across her skin or the man beside her. Gregory Vale didn't offer comfort. He issued directives. He told her to hide the evidence of his rage without even glancing her way, as if her pain was merely a smudge on his pristine schedule. She touched the heat radiating from her cheek, feeling the pulse of a fresh wound. He commanded her silence and lowered eyes, treating her like a business transaction about to be closed. When she whispered a final plea for mercy, his voice was ice. He wasn't her father anymore. He was just a man offloading a burden he no longer wanted to carry. The rejection was a blade, sharp and absolute. From that moment, she was someone else's problem. They drove into the sunless depths of a private estate, a place where Adrian Russo's name carried the weight of a king. He was the architect of the city's silent, brutal underworld. This was the world where men vanished and debts were settled in flesh. Gregory, the supposed pillar of society, was trading his own blood to save his empire. A hollow man handing over a shattered girl to settle a ledger, pretending it was just business. She expected a cage or a slaughterhouse. Instead, the gates revealed a hauntingly beautiful sanctuary of glass and stone, glowing like a dying ember in the downpour. It was a palace built on secrets, sprawling through the rain-soaked darkness like a dream of another world. Wealth whispered from every shadow. Marble, sculptures, and the quiet sound of the rain. Standing in the storm, her dress felt like a thin shroud. Cold and trembling, she realized the man who raised her had dressed her like a sacrifice for a god of shadows. She had played her part, wearing the silk he chose, knowing the alternative was far worse. As they entered, the butler's gaze held a flicker of something painful. Either pity for her or disgust for the man who brought her there. He signaled that the master was waiting. The house felt like a museum of frozen moments, expensive and suffocating. They walked through corridors of high-end art until they reached the heart of the machine. Behind those heavy doors sat the man who now held the keys to her existence. There was no scream, just a soft click. Adrian Russo didn't look like a beast. He looked like a god of the night, holding a glass of amber liquid by the fire. He was sharp edges and tailored suits, a predator perfectly at home in his natural habitat. He was younger and more striking than the rumors suggested, mid-30ish with eyes that could cut glass. When he spoke, his voice was a low, dangerous melody. He noted their tardiness with a calmness that felt far more threatening than any shout. His focus shifted to her, heavy and unyielding. When her father tried to present her like a gift, Adrian's correction was soft but devastating. He remembered the 3 weeks of begging. He remembered the desperation that brought Gregory to his knees. He walked toward her, the scent of expensive cologne and old smoke trailing in his wake. He laid out the timeline of her father's failure, his presence looming over her until she felt the air grow thin. This was the moment the trade became real. Her father tried to bargain with her worth, but Adrian cut him down with a single truth. She was a person, not a product. He asked her age, 23, and then he commanded her to look him in the eyes, demanding she face her own destiny. In that gaze, there was no lust, only a clinical assessment of the wreckage. He saw the bruises on her face and the marks on her arms. He asked the one question no one in her life ever dared to voice. Did he do this to you? The world went still. For the first time, someone acknowledged the violence hidden behind her father's status. Under the pressure of his stare, she whispered the truth. The air in the room suddenly felt like a gathering storm, cold and electric. Without raising his voice, Adrian ordered her father to vanish. The deal was changing, and the man who sold his daughter was no longer welcome. Gregory tried to protest, but the weight of Adrian's presence silenced him instantly, forcing him to retreat. The click of the door was the sound of a cage opening or a new one closing. Serena stood in the silence, abandoned by her own blood, realizing she was now alone with the most dangerous man in the city. Her father hadn't even looked back. He told her to sit, his voice devoid of the cruelty she expected. While the fire hissed and the rain hammered the glass, he watched her. He didn't move toward her. He simply acknowledged her pain with a heavy, somber truth. You're hurt. She confessed the history of the violence, the words spilling out of her like a broken dam. She told him about the ribs, the recurring nightmare of her father's temper. Adrian listened with a stillness that was more terrifying than rage. He summoned a doctor immediately, demanding care instead of submission. Serena watched him, her mind spinning. This wasn't the transaction she had prepared for. This was something far more complex and confusing. He wasn't acting like a master, but a guardian. She asked the question burning in her chest. Why wasn't he taking what he'd bought? Adrian looked at her then, his expression shifting into something almost weary. He wasn't a collector of broken souls. He was something entirely different from her father. He explained that he never accepted people as payments. Her father had made a fatal assumption based on his own greed. For Adrian, the meeting was over, and the real work of her survival was finally beginning under his protection. He promised her safety, food, sleep, and a doctor's care. When she confessed she had nowhere to go, he made it clear he wouldn't let her go back to the man who broke her. The doors to her old life were locked forever. He saw through the polished veneer of men like Gregory Vale, the ones who rot from the inside out and call their cruelty discipline. He recognized the pattern of the abuser, and he wasn't about to let that cycle continue in his home. When the doctor arrived, the room finally felt like a place of healing rather than a site of sacrifice. Adrian stepped back, leaving her to the care she had deserved for 23 years, as the midnight rain continued to wash the world clean. "You're safe for now, darling," Adrian murmured, stepping toward the exit. He promised to be close by if she felt the need to call out. Then, the silence of the room swallowed his departure, leaving Serena alone with a physician whose gentle touch felt like a foreign language after years of cruelty. She surrendered to the examination, whispering answers about the maps of pain etched into her skin. When the doctor's hands found her fractured ribs, the agony flared like a blinding white star, and Serena fought the urge to crumble. "Nothing is shattered," Dr. Chen eventually concluded, her voice a soft anchor. "Severe contusion, certainly, but you'll survive. You've been spared the worst." Serena didn't feel spared. She felt discarded. The doctor administered relief for the throbbing ache. tended to the jagged split above her eye, and bound her torso in tight wraps. She spoke in hushed, rhythmic tones about the necessity of stillness and the slow path to healing before gathering her instruments and vanishing into the night. The cavernous office grew cold, lit only by the flickering embers of a dying hearth and the rhythmic weeping of the rain against the glass. Time became a blur of shadows until the heavy door creaked once more. It wasn't Adrienne this time. A younger woman appeared, her attire dark and unassuming. "I'm Elena," she introduced herself, a faint Slavic lilt coloring her words. "Allow me to guide you to your quarters." Serena's voice was a mere breath. "My room?" Elena simply nodded, beckoning her forward. Lacking any other destination, Serena trailed behind her through the dim hallways. They navigated a labyrinth of closed doors until Elena paused, swinging one open to reveal a sanctuary that dwarfed Serena's entire past existence. It was a cathedral of comfort, a colossal bed draped in ivory silk, expansive windows looking out over a darkened estate, and a master bath of polished marble bathed in a golden ethereal glow. "The wardrobe is stocked," Elena noted, her gaze lingering on Serena's tattered state. "The fit may be imperfect, but anything is an improvement over those rags. The bath is yours to use. If hunger strikes, the kitchen is at your service, or you can request a meal here." She gestured toward a vintage phone resting on the nightstand. "Just dial 0. Serena found herself staring, bewildered. Why this kindness? Elena's features softened into a look of genuine pity. "Mr. Russo gave the command," Elena admitted, pausing as she reached the threshold. "But beyond that, it's clear you've forgotten what it feels like to be treated as human." She hesitated, looking back. "He isn't the monster the world describes, you know. Everyone has a history." She shook her head as if to clear the thought. "Try to sleep. The dawn usually brings clarity." With that, the door clicked shut, leaving Serena to wander the room, touching the surfaces to ensure she hadn't finally lost her mind. The mattress was a cloud. The garments in the closet bore the names of high-end designers she had only ever seen through reinforced glass. In the bathroom, she found plush linens and fragrances that smelled of expensive flowers beside a tub deep enough to disappear in. When she finally faced her reflection, she froze. The mark on her cheek had matured into a deep celestial purple, bleeding into a sickly blue. Her lip was a jagged mess, and her eyes looked like two dark, hollow pits of terror. She didn't recognize the prey staring back at her. Shunning the mirror, she retreated into a shower so hot it felt like a penance. She stood there until the steam choked the air and the water ran clear, until her trembling limbs finally stilled. Dressed in a borrowed shirt that drowned her frame, she crawled beneath the heavy quilts and pulled them to her throat. Rest remained a ghost. She lay paralyzed in the darkness, the rain a constant percussion against her racing thoughts. The reality was a jagged pill. Her own father had bartered her like livestock, delivering her to this fortress and walking away without a backward glance. Yet Adrian Russo, the man whispered about in terrifying legends, had chosen to heal her wounds instead of exploiting them, granting her a sanctuary that locked from within. She had tested the bolt twice just to be sure. The logic of the world had shattered. As the first gray fingers of dawn crept through the curtains, exhaustion finally won. Her sleep was short, broken by a gentle rapping at the wood. "Miss Vale?" a soft, masculine voice called. "Mr. Russo sent me to inform you that breakfast is waiting." Serena sat up, her ribs screaming at the movement. "I'll be there soon," she managed, her voice thick with sleep. The sound of retreating steps echoed. She moved with the grace of the wounded, finding a sweater and leggings that clung loosely to her frame. Following the rich aroma of roasted beans and sizzling iron, she found a kitchen of industrial scale and stone. Adrian was there, perched at a marble island, his attention buried in a digital tablet while a cup of dark liquid steamed beside him. He looked up, his gaze heavy and unreadable. "How's the body holding up?" "Everything hurts," she replied, lingering like a phantom in the doorway. "But it's a better kind of pain." "Have a seat," he commanded gently. Alona prepared enough to feed a small battalion. As Serena took her place, Elena materialized with a feast of gold-yolked eggs and fresh fruit. She offered a small smile before slipping away. "Eat first," Adrian said. "The talking comes later." She didn't need to be told twice. Her body was a vacuum of hunger. The meal was more than sustenance. It was real. When she finally slowed, Adrian slid the coffee toward her. "I recall you prefer it black. Elena's brew is the only thing that gets me through the day." She took a tentative sip and found he was right. Setting his device aside, Adrian leaned in, his focus narrowing solely on her. "I have questions, and they won't be easy. Tell me if it becomes too much," he cautioned. Serena gripped the warm ceramic as if it were a life raft. "Go ahead." "Your father," Adrian began. "How long has he been using you as a punching bag?" "Since I was 14, she whispered. "Right after my mother passed." "And before the funeral?" "I was a ghost. She kept him at bay. Once she was gone, I became the only thing left for him to break." Adrian's jaw turned to iron. "Did he ever—" He trailed off, the unspoken horror hanging between them. "Did he cross lines beyond physical violence?" Serena realized the weight of the question and shook her head quickly. "No. Just the blows. The bruises you see. He once shattered a glass against me, and I needed medical attention, but nothing like that." Adrienne let out a slow, controlled breath. "That is the only piece of good news. Did anyone notice? Friends? The authorities?" "I was kept isolated. Teachers don't dig for secrets if the grades stay high and the student stays silent," she explained. "And Gregory Vale is a name that silences most people before they can ask a question." "True," Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave. "But names lose their power eventually." Serena set her cup down, her eyes searching his. "Why do you care about these details?" "Because I need to understand the rot I'm dealing with. Your father didn't just owe me a debt, Serena. He's a ghost haunting his own life, borrowing from every shadow, forging records, and living on borrowed time. His empire is a house of cards built on deception, and the wind is picking up. Dragging you here was his final desperate play. He thought offering you as collateral would earn him a reprieve, a bit of leverage, or perhaps some misplaced mercy. He was gravely mistaken. So what's his fate?" "That's a variable," Adrienne replied, leaning back. "It depends on both of us. Gregory Vale is finished, that much is written in stone. But the severity of his fall, how public and how agonizing it becomes, is something I can influence. The real question is, what is your desire in all this?" Serena could only stare at him, stunned. "What I want. Yes, you. What do you wish to see happen?" It was the first time in 21 years someone had treated her will as a factor. He asked as if her opinion carried weight, as if she weren't just a piece on a chessboard. I don't have an answer," she confessed. That's acceptable. You don't need to decide this morning. Adrian stood, taking his coffee with him. For the time being, this house is your fortress. You have shelter, food, and peace. Reflect on it. When the fog clears, we'll discuss the path forward. And if I choose to walk out that door? He looked at her with a steady, unwavering intensity. Then the door stays open. You aren't a captive, Serena. You never were. Your father's vote has been revoked permanently. His voice was like a gavel strike. Whatever follows, the choice belongs to you, not to him, and certainly not to me. He left her alone in the sunlight, a strange, terrifying spark of hope beginning to flicker in her chest. The following week felt like a fever dream. Serena drifted through the massive estate like a wandering spirit, caught between the roles of guest and refugee. Elena provided her meals with quiet efficiency. Dr. Chen returned to monitor the fading marks. Marcus, the young man from that first morning, became a constant, helpful shadow. It was a life of luxury built on the foundations of a nightmare. Adrian was often a ghost himself, swallowed by the demands of his dark industry for days at a time. Yet in his brief returns, he would seek her out to gauge her recovery or offer small, mundane kindnesses. Sometimes they shared words. Other times the silence was enough. It was during one of those quiet evenings, 7 days into her new life, that the pressure of the unknown finally broke her silence. They were settled in the library, a towering vault of leather-bound wisdom that felt more like a sanctuary than a room. Serena had spent her afternoons lost in its rolling ladders and velvet alcoves. Adrienne was buried in paperwork at a distant desk while she sat curled in an oversized chair, her eyes tracing the same sentence over and over without comprehension. "What was the real motive for taking me?" she finally blurted out. Adrienne looked up from his work. "I've explained the situation." "No," she countered, her voice gaining strength. "You explained the politics, but you didn't explain why you're shielding me, why you're helping a girl you don't even know. I'm nothing to you." He stared at her for a long, heavy beat before closing his ledger and turning his full attention her way. "When I was 17, he began, his voice dropping into a low, mournful register. "My father sold my younger sister to settle a debt at the card table." Serena felt the air leave her lungs. She was 15. She was brilliant, full of life, and dreamed of being a surgeon. His tone was flat, but the underlying pain was as jagged as a rusted blade. The man who bought her, he didn't break her immediately. He played a sick game of domesticity for 6 months. He made her believe there was a future until he grew bored. Then he destroyed her so completely that she couldn't find her way back. She came home a shell and took her own life 2 years later. Adrienne's hands tightened on the armrests, then slowly released. "My father never shed a tear, never confessed his sin. He died a pathetic drunk in a gutter 5 years later, still chasing the next big win at someone else's expense. And the man who broke her, I ensured he never hurt anyone again." Adrienne spoke of the killing as if it were a simple weather report. "It wasn't swift. I spent years climbing, gaining the power to get close enough. I took my time with him." Serena didn't feel the urge to run. She didn't feel horror. Instead, a profound sadness washed over her for the sister he couldn't save and the boy who had to become a monster to find justice. "Is that why you do this?" she asked. "Absolution? Don't mistake me for a saint, Serena." Adrienne's voice rasped like gravel over silk. I don't play the savior. My hands are stained by a legacy built on bone and terror. I've broken the wicked and the innocent alike. Heroism isn't in my blood. He offered a smile that mirrored a winter's dawn, bright yet utterly cold. Call me a hypocrite, he muttered, the shadows of the room clinging to his frame. I deal in darkness, yet your father's brand of cruelty. It turned my stomach. Seeing what he did to you that night, the way he discarded his own soul, I couldn't just watch. Maybe it's a selfish kind of penance, but I simply wouldn't allow it. Serena closed her book, the silence of the room suddenly heavy. What's the endgame? Adrian paced toward the window, watching the moonlight dance on the grass. We're going to dismantle him. While he's been frantically burying his sins and begging for scraps, I've been unleashing a legion of lawyers and hounds to strip his life bare. The reality is far more grotesque than you imagined, he continued, his tone dropping an octave. He laid out the rot. Charities bled dry, investors swindled into nothingness, and slums built on the backs the desperate. For 20 years, Gregory Vale had played the pillar of society while feeding on the trust of everyone he touched. What about my place in his web? Serena's voice trembled. Adrian turned, his eyes piercing. To him, you were a payout. He took a life insurance policy out on you 3 months back. $2 million. Your death was his exit strategy. The violence wasn't just anger, it was a calculated rehearsal for your end. He was cornered, Adrian explained, his jaw set tight. When his debts came due, he thought he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, hand you to a monster like me, and hope I'd finish the job for him. But I didn't play along. Now he's paralyzed. He can't claim the money while you breathe, and he can't touch you while I'm standing in his way. The trap is shut, he said, moving into her personal space. He's got nowhere left to run. Now, Serena, tell me how deep you want the blade to go. I can erase him quietly, leave him to rot in a gutter of debt, or I can tear his mask off in front of the whole world. I can make sure his name becomes a synonym for monster. She thought of the long sleeves she wore in summer, the way her heart hammered at every sudden noise, and the look in his eyes that final night. He didn't see a daughter. He saw a liability that needed to be liquidated. The memory of his cold gaze burned like acid in her throat. I want the world to see the rot, she whispered. A genuine, dangerous smile finally touched Adrian's lips. Then we'll give them a show. Over the next 14 days, a war room was born. They didn't just gather evidence, they crafted a masterpiece of ruin, documenting every tremor of Gregory Vale's wretched soul for maximum impact. As the days bled into one another, the walls between them began to crumble. The stiff formality of their arrangement dissolved into late-night confessions. He spoke of the blood it took to build his kingdom from nothing, while she mourned the girl she used to be before her father tried to extinguish her spirit in the dark. He became more than a protector. He became a mentor. He taught her how to read the lies hidden in a man's eyes and how to command a room with nothing but a glance. Fear is a tool, he'd tell her. Don't let it paralyze you. Let it sharpen you into something they can't break. You've got a fire in you that he couldn't put out, Adrian remarked one afternoon in the gym. Between breaths, as they sparred, he reminded her that surviving years of systematic breaking wasn't a sign of fragility. It was proof of an iron will that her father never possessed, despite all his stolen power. Serena deflected a strike, her movements mirroring his guidance. I don't feel powerful, she panted. He didn't let up. Power isn't about being untouchable. It's about standing back up every single time you're knocked down. They pushed until her lungs burned, and for the first time the weight on her chest felt lighter. She found him late that evening, draped in shadows and the scent of aged whiskey. "How much longer until the end?" she asked. He looked up, his eyes weary but focused. "A week? There's a charity gala where they plan to crown him a saint. It's the perfect place for a public crucifixion." "I'm going with you," Serena stated, leaving no room for argument. Adrian hesitated, his gaze lingering on her. "I need to watch his world burn," she added. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, but we play by my rules. You stay close and you follow my lead. We do this in a way that keeps you safe." "And after the dust settles?" Adrian asked, rising from his desk. What does Serena want for herself? She had already found the answer in the quiet hours. "I want to be the sanctuary I never had. I want to build a place for the broken, somewhere they can finally find peace and a new beginning. Then we'll lay the first stone together," he promised simply. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, but something far more visceral, a pact between two fractured souls trying to find a way to be whole again. That night, the nightmares stayed away, and she finally slept in a silence that felt like peace. The ballroom was a sea of shimmering silk and hollow smiles. Men in $5,000 tuxedos sipped vintage champagne, performing their roles in the theater of high society. At the center stood Gregory Vale, the master of ceremonies, basking in a glory built on a foundation of lies and the blood of the innocent. He looked untouchable, a man who believed he'd successfully buried his sins. He hadn't noticed her yet. Serena stood at the threshold, draped in midnight blue silk, looking every bit the queen of the empire Adrian had built. The bruises were gone, hidden beneath a mask of cold, expensive elegance and newfound strength. "Ready to set the world on fire," Adrian whispered. She gave a sharp nod. As they walked in, the room's oxygen seemed to vanish. All eyes fixed on Adrian, a wolf in a tailored suit. And then they saw the girl they thought was broken, standing tall and radiant at his side. The whispers began instantly. Gregory's glass nearly slipped from his white-knuckled grip as his face drained of color. He looked like he'd seen a ghost from his darkest nightmares. As he started toward them, Adrian's hand settled firmly against her back. "Steady," he breathed into her ear. "Let the panic sink in first. Let him drown in his own fear." They moved through the crowd like a slow-moving storm. Adrian introduced her to the city's power players, and Serena met their gazes with a new, terrifying clarity. She was no longer a victim. She was a witness to her father's impending doom, standing in a place he never thought she would dare to enter again. The air grew thick with irony as the accolades poured in. One by one, people praised Gregory's charitable spirit, while the man himself stood on stage, soaking up the lies. Serena watched him, her heart turning to ice, until Adrian reached out and squeezed her hand, a silent reminder that the clock was finally ticking for him. Suddenly, the lights died. Behind a stammering Gregory, the massive screen flickered to life. It wasn't a tribute. It was a dossier of horror. Bank records, fraudulent deeds, and then the photos, the raw, undeniable evidence of what he'd done to his daughter. The $2 million price tag on her life hung there for all. A suffocating silence blanketed the ballroom. Gregory's face was a mask of pure terror as he searched the room for a friendly face. But he found only the cold, judging stares of his peers. The man who had spent 20 years stealing from the world was finally standing naked and exposed before it. "Gregory Vale," a voice thundered through the silence. The doors burst open as law enforcement flooded the floor, led by a detective with a grim expression. "You're under arrest for fraud, grand larceny, and the attempted murder of your own daughter." The perfect life he had constructed shattered in a single heartbeat. As they dragged him past her, his eyes were full of a feral, impotent rage. "You ungrateful little brat," he spat. The venom of his soul finally laid bare for the world. Serena didn't flinch. "I'm not ungrateful," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm simply finished with you and your lies." The facade of high society collapsed into a frenzy of flashing cameras and fleeing guests. Adrienne led her away from the wreckage, shielding her from the chaos until they were safe inside the quiet sanctuary of his car. They drove back to the estate, the city lights blurring into a streak of forgotten history. Only when heavy doors of the estate locked behind them did the adrenaline finally fade. Serena felt the invisible chains of a lifetime snap. "It's over," she whispered, looking at Adrian. "You saved me." He shook his head. "You stood up, Serena. We just made sure you didn't have to do it alone." A faint smile touched his lips as he reached out, tucking a stray lock behind her ear with a tenderness that left a hollow ache in her chest. "Where do we go from here?" he whispered. The question was a familiar ghost, but the air between them had finally shifted. Serena looked at him, her voice steady. "Now," she said, "we build something that won't break." And she knew with a soul-deep certainty that they would. The path ahead promised no mercy. There would be storms of public scrutiny and those who preferred to stay blind to the truth. Yet she had already been baptized in fire and emerged whole. The terrified child, trembling in the shadows of her father's car, was gone. She was Serena Vale now, and she was finished playing the part of the victim. This was merely the prologue. The headlines began to scream before the sun had even cleared the horizon. Serena woke to a phone that had become a frantic pulse of alerts. News flashes, social media tags, and messages from ghosts she didn't recognize. Propped up against the pillows, her body still humming with the dull throb of healing, she watched as her private agony transformed into public entertainment. The giants were falling. Gregory Vale in handcuffs, his crooked empire crumbling into dust. Then came the headline that hit closest, the one exposing the rot of his abuse. It was paired with a shot of her and Adrian leaving the gala, his hand a steady weight on her back. She looked weathered, perhaps a bit weary, but for the first time in years she looked truly present. A soft rap at the door broke the silence. "Enter." Elena slipped inside, balancing a tray of breakfast essentials. "Mr. Russo thought you should eat in peace," she murmured. "The vultures have gathered at the gate." Serena asked for the count. 15 and growing, Elena replied, pouring the coffee. "Security is holding the line, but they're desperate. One even tried to scale the perimeter an hour ago." Clutching the mug, Serena let the heat seep into her palms. "Is Adrian awake?" she asked. Elena nodded. "Since 4 in the morning, buried in legal calls. He wanted you to know that the world can wait until you're ready. He's prepared to face the firing squad of cameras for you so you don't have to." "I appreciate that," Serena said, taking a slow sip. "But I can't hide forever." Perhaps not, but forever didn't have to start today. After Elena withdrew, Serena took her time getting ready. The woman staring back from the glass was a stranger. The deep purples were turning to a sickly yellow, but the real change was beneath the skin. A new steel had settled in her gaze, a quiet awakening. She found Adrian in his study, exactly where she expected. He was barking rapid-fire Italian into his phone, his tone jagged with frustration. Seeing her, he signaled for a moment of patience, ending the call with a few clipped phrases that felt like a blade being drawn from a sheath. "Apologies," he sighed, dropping the device. My cousin seems to think he's better at damage control than I am. Serena arched a brow. Is he? Hardly. He gestured toward the empty chair. How is your spirit holding up? She settled in. I've seen better days, and certainly darker ones. Adrian slid a thick file across the mahogany. This is the schedule for the next 72 hours, he explained. Fraud, witness accounts, the whole paper trail. His legal team is frantic, but they're chasing shadows. The trap is shut tight. Serena flipped through the pages, her mind swimming in a sea of cold, hard numbers she couldn't quite grasp. The jargon felt like a foreign tongue, but the subtext was loud and clear. Her father was erased. And what happens to me? She asked. Those people outside, what do they want? Adrian leaned back. They want the tragedy, the exclusive. I can sweep them away, or we can dictate the terms of the narrative together. A single interview, your rules, no traps, he suggested. There's a journalist named Sarah Chen who understands the weight of these things. If you speak, let it be to her. Serena shut the folder. What is there to say? Adrian's eyes didn't waver. The truth. But remember, you don't owe the public a single drop of your blood. She weighed the silence against the noise of others defining her life. Victim, survivor, pawn. She refused to let them choose the labels for her. Make the call, she decided. I'll do the interview. Adrian gave a slow, approving nod. We'll hold it here on our ground, he agreed. And I'll be right beside you if you wish. I do. A sharp ring interrupted them. Adrian's brow furrowed at the name on the screen. Detective Morris. He's the lead on your father's arrest. As she rose to leave, he gestured for her to stay. This involves you, he said, putting it on speaker. Morris's voice was like gravel, the sound of a man who'd seen too much of the world's rot. There's a complication. Gregory's lawyers are pushing for bail, playing the pillar of the community card. They're making their move this afternoon. Adrian's face turned to stone. He isn't walking out. Morris sighed. I'm fighting it, but they're good. They're painting this as a corporate hit job, claiming you've brainwashed her to take out a rival. That's beyond ridiculous, Serena snapped. Morris didn't sound so sure. Maybe, but he's got powerful friends pulling strings. I need a silver bullet, the detective continued. Something that makes the judge see him for the monster he is. Adrian looked at Serena, a silent invitation. The insurance policy, she realized aloud. That's not just fraud, it's a death warrant. We need to prove he wanted her dead, Morris countered. A policy can be explained away as financial planning. We need the smoking gun of intent. Serena's thoughts drifted back to the cold months leading up to her escape, searching for the shadows. She remembered the venom in his voice, the way he'd stripped her of her humanity one word at a time. He told me I was nothing, she said, her voice hollow. But there was a night, about 6 weeks back. He was deep in the bottle. He said everyone has a price, even if it's only realized when they're in the ground. Morris pressed for the specifics. Serena took a breath. He said, even trash has value to the right person. Sometimes you're worth more dead than alive. Then he just laughed. That's heavy, Morris admitted. That might be exactly what we need. It's a start, but I need paper, Morris said. Emails, texts, anything that proves he planned the hit. Adrian was already flying across his keys. My team will tear his digital life apart. If the evidence exists, we'll have it. Make it quick. The hearing is at 2. Watching him, Serena felt a strange pull toward this man. Her guardian, her conspirator, perhaps more. You didn't have to share that memory, Adrian said quietly, his eyes still on the screen. I had to, she replied. He'll make you say it again in court, he warned. They'll try to break you on the stand. Let them try, she said, moving to the glass. Below, the media pack waited like wolves for a scrap of meat. I'm finished living in his shadow. By midday, the digital ghosts had been summoned, and Adrian's team had found the rot. The trail was filthy. Messages to an advisor about the payout, texts to a shadow named Jay about handling the nuisance, and a log of calls to a hired gun. At 1:30, Morris's voice returned, sounding triumphant. We got the win! The judge locked the door and threw away the key. Serena felt a phantom weight lift from her shoulders. There's a bonus, Morris added. We picked up the muscle, Jimmy Roar. He's already singing to save his own skin. He says Gregory paid him 50% up front to stage a tragedy, Morris explained. A break-in gone wrong, a fatal wreck. Anything to keep the blood off the old man's hands. Adrian's grip on the phone turned his knuckles white. If you hadn't brought her home that night, Morris whispered, I'd be at a crime scene right now. Serena barely made it to her room before the world tilted. The clinical reality of her own father brokering her death like a common stock was a coldness that soaked into her bones. She sat on the edge of the abyss, gasping for air. A soft knock followed. Serena, it's me. Adrian stepped in, reading the wreckage of her expression instantly. He sat near her, a steady presence in the dark. I'm fine, she lied. You aren't, he countered, and you don't have to be. He was actually going to end me, she whispered, her voice fracturing. His own flesh and blood. Adrian's voice was a low, somber vibration. He only saw numbers, never a daughter. Some men are born without a soul. Serena wiped a tear away, her grief turning to a cold, sharp anger. I'm done wasting my sorrow on a ghost. Stop wasting tears on that ghost. You aren't mourning the man. You're mourning the father he never chose to be. There's a world of difference in that grief. A heavy silence settled between them until her breath finally found its rhythm again. The tremors faded into the shadows. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely a thread, for being my shield, for actually seeing me. Gratitude isn't necessary here. Her eyes searched his, unyielding. It is to me. You had every chance to settle my father's tab and cast us into the wind. Why stay? He let the question hang in the air, thick and suffocating. Because I've felt the weight of being helpless, he finally confessed. I know the agony of watching the ones you love break while you stand by, paralyzed. Looking at you that night was like seeing a ghost, my sister's ghost. Turning away wasn't an option. Her voice trembled. So, is that my role? A shot at redemption? His gaze locked onto hers. Initially, perhaps, but the script has changed. Into what? A faint, tragic smile touched his lips. I'm still searching for the words. 3 days passed before Sarah Chen arrived. She walked in with a gentle grace, armed only with a notebook and a calm that Serena hadn't expected. They gathered in the library. The only sanctuary Serena truly felt was hers. He lingered in the periphery, a shadow of protection just out of sight. The journalist began softly, tracing the lines of a lost childhood and a mother's memory before the darkness took hold. Every response was measured, a calculated step on a tightrope, knowing the world would soon dissect her every syllable. There was a genuine weight to the way Sarah listened, a rare empathy that transcended a mere tabloid scoop. Then the air grew thin as the inquiry deepened. When did the realization hit that your father wanted you dead? Serena swallowed hard. The moment the investigator mentioned the contract killer, I always knew there was malice in him, but I never imagined it had a price tag. I was acquainted with his cruelty, but I refused to believe his blood ran that cold. The terror must be unspeakable. It lingers. I still wake up in a cold sweat, momentarily forgetting he's behind iron bars. Only when the reality sets in can I truly inhale. And Gregory Vale, what should the public see? She paused. The man they know is a complete fabrication. The world applauded the tycoon and the philanthropist, but that was just a hollow shell. Concealed within was a predator who ruined lives for amusement, a thief of souls who never batted an eye. I need the truth to scream. The reporter's eyes flickered toward the corner where the silent guardian waited. And what of Adrian Russo? Whispers suggest you're just a tool for his vengeance, a chess piece in a corporate blood feud. Serena's voice rang out with newfound steel. They couldn't be more wrong. That man pulled me from the wreckage. He owed me nothing, yet he gave me a fortress, a moment to breathe, and the fire to resist. I refuse to be a casualty of his rival's imagination. I am a survivor who found sanctuary in the last place anyone would look. Sarah scribbled away, acknowledging the gravity. Final question. What does tomorrow hold for you? The horizon is still blurry, she confessed. I'm learning how to exist outside his shadow, but my heart is set on reaching back for those still caught in the snare. I intend to forge a legacy that actually carries weight, a noble foundation to build upon. Once the journalist departed with promise of a 3-day turnaround, Adrian poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, whiskey, straight. Serena sank into the velvet cushions, drained to her core, yet feeling as though a lead weight had finally been lifted from her chest. You handled that with grace, he remarked, taking the seat opposite her. I kept my composure. No tears. I'll take the victory. Truth is more powerful than any win. She let the spirit sear her throat. She prodded about our connection. What I mean to you. I was listening. I dodged it. I saw that. It's because the answer is still unwritten. Serena set the crystal down. Define us, Adrian. What is this? He studied her, the silence stretching between them. Perhaps we're just 2 souls who collided in the pitch black. Where the road leads is a mystery we'll solve together. It wasn't a vow, nor a grand romantic gesture, but its raw honesty was the anchor she needed. Then, the following week, the storm truly broke loose. The courtroom clock began to tick. The dam broke, and a flood of incriminating evidence poured out. Gregory's allies scurried like rats, trading secrets for their own skin. His fortune was locked away. His name was nothing but cinders. Serena remained within the manor's walls, spending her dawns in combat training, forging a new strength from a body once broken by his hands. Between the pages of library books and planning her new mission with the staff, she found her rhythm. Her nights were spent in low-toned conversations with him, drifting between trivialities and the profound. An unspoken tension hummed beneath the surface, a dance they both recognized but feared to label. That was until the night the air finally shifted. Restlessness took hold of her. She wandered down in search of tea, only to find him on the terrace, a glowing ember in his hand as he watched the shadows. A secret vice? She asked softly. He offered a weary half-smile. A relic from my younger, more turbulent years. It only resurfaces when the pressure builds. What's weighing on you? The legal team is hunting for a compromise, a plea bargain. They want to trade his testimony for a lighter sentence. She stepped into the cool night air beside him. Can they succeed? Not on my watch. He released a plume of smoke into the dark. I won't allow him to slip through the cracks of justice. But if the system fails, then we ensure his infamy is etched into every mind. He will never know peace again. I'll see to it that his remaining years are a living purgatory. The sheer vitriol in his tone should have been chilling, but to her it felt like a warm embrace, the sound of a man who actually cared. Can I be blunt with you? She whispered. Always. Do you look at me and see something shattered? He turned his focus entirely on her. Hardly. You're in the process of mending. It's a different state entirely. It doesn't feel like mending. It feels like a constant burning rage at him, at my own silence, at a world that turned a blind eye. That fire is necessary, he said, crushing his cigarette. I lived in that furnace for years after my sister was taken. It was the only thing that gave me the strength to stand. In time, that fury evolves into something functional, but you have to let it burn first. And what did it become for you? A mission. He moved into her space. I vowed to become the shield I never had. I gathered power not for the sake of it, but to stand between the vulnerable and the monsters. It's a flawed path, certainly. I am far from a saint, but I refuse to be a bystander. She tilted her head back, caught in the gravity of his gaze, noting the amber flecks in his eyes. The scent of tobacco and expensive cologne mingled with his own unique warmth. I'm eternally grateful for your intervention, she murmured. The night I was delivered to this doorstep, I was ready for the end. I had reconciled with my own demise. You rewrote the script? You rewrote it, he countered softly. I merely provided the stage. Perhaps it was a joint effort. Perhaps. His fingers grazed her cheek, a ghost of a touch. Then the world slowed. A gentle inclination, a shared breath, a lingering heartbeat where the choice was made to move forward together. The contact was hesitant, a tender inquiry, as if he feared she might crumble under his touch. She leaned into him, finally tasting a sensation that wasn't laced with terror. As they broke for air, he leaned his brow against hers. Is this all right? His voice was a low vibration. Yes. The certainty in her own heart caught her off guard. And for you? Beyond words. They remained anchored to one another, sharing the same quiet atmosphere. It wasn't quite love. That word felt like a foreign language she'd forgotten. But it was a profound tethering of two souls who had crawled through the wreckage of their lives and found themselves still upright, however marked by the journey. Safe in her quarters, she replayed the moment, the heat of his kiss and the weight of her heart leaning toward a man the public feared. They saw a predator. She saw the soul beneath the armor. They couldn't grasp that those labeled as monsters are often just survivors who adapted to a world that gave them no other choice but to bite back. Her sleep was paved with visions of her new legacy, of the women she would save and the life she was harvesting from the ashes. For once, the shadows stayed away from her dreams. She woke the next morning to a room flooded with gold, but the tranquility was shattered by the sharp echoes of a confrontation echoing from the lower floors. She scrambled into her clothes, her body still aching, but her spirit renewed, and tracked the shouting to the study. Through the ajar door, she saw a stranger, a man in his 60s, draped in luxury that couldn't mask his jagged edges. His features were distorted by fury. This is a blunder you can't afford. The stranger spat. The ties Gregory maintains are lethal. They have long memories. Let them queue up with the rest of my enemies, Adrian replied, his tone like a winter wind. I'm not retreating, Vincent. You crossed the line into my private life. That girl in your bed. Mind your tongue, Adrian interrupted, the air in the room turning lethal. Be very careful with your next sentence. Vincent raised his palms in a mocking surrender. The word on the street is you've lost your edge, getting played by a little waitress with a tragic tale and a nice smile. Serena should have remained a ghost in the hallway, but a searing fire erupted in her lungs. Ignoring every instinct for safety, she threw the door wide and stepped into the fray. Both figures froze as she entered. Vincent's eyes stripped her down, a freezing blend of apathy and scrutiny. Adrian's face warped into a mask of frantic irritation. I'm not the help, Serena breathed, anchoring her voice against the rising panic. I'm a survivor, and I'm nobody's puppet. Vincent's smile was a jagged scar. So, the little bird chirps. Adrian, provide a proper name or let me speculate. Vincent Caruso, Adrian stated tonelessly. It's in my associate until 30 seconds ago. End the drama. Vincent's glare remained locked on Serena. Do you grasp the gravity of your actions, girl? You've painted a massive bullseye on your own spine. Vale's Circle won't simply overlook this. You shamed him, gutted his reputation in front of the world. Such things demand a blood price. Serena whispered a single word. Good. Serena insisted he earned far worse than just a public fall. Perhaps. But do you truly feel protected here? You think Adrian can shield you from every predator using you as bait? Vincent gave a slow, pitying shake of his head. You're a ticking bomb, and bombs kill the people holding them. Adrian stepped forward, his stance radiating lethal intent. Get out. Vincent, leave, now. Lest I forget we were once brothers. Vincent held his gaze for a heavy heartbeat, then gave a hollow shrug. Your funeral, then. He pivoted toward the exit, but stopped beside Serena. Guard your throat, darling. The city devours fragile things like you. Then he vanished, his leather shoes clicking like a countdown in the hallway. Serena's hands were trembling. She crossed her arms tightly. Is his warning true? Adrian's jaw remained locked in a hard line. About me being a danger, about the target on my back. Serena, stop! I need the truth. Am I a death sentence for you just by staying? By hunting my father? Adrian let out a jagged breath, raking fingers through his hair. Vincent's just rattled. Your father's old partners are seeing their fortunes vanish with his fall. They're hunting for a scapegoat. That's a dodge, not a fact. Fine. Yes, there are vultures unhappy with Gregory Vale's collapse. Men who traded with him, men who owe him blood debts, men who think I've crossed a line. But those shadows were always creeping closer. You didn't invite them in. They were already waiting at the gate. You aren't the cause of this storm. You just turned on the lights. Serena drifted to the glass, staring out at the darkening estate. He labeled me a liability. Was he lying? She spun around to meet Adrian's eyes. Be brutal with me. Has my presence here poisoned your life? Adrian fell into a heavy silence. He slowly crossed the mahogany floor to stand directly before her. Yes, he admitted, his voice a low rumble. Everything is a mess now. My partners think I've gone soft, lost my edge. Others suspect I'm playing a deep game with you that they can't see yet. And then there are snakes like Vincent who view you as a jugular they can rip out. The raw truth cut deep, but Serena preferred the sting of reality over the hollow comfort of a beautiful lie. But here is the part Vincent and the rest of the world fail to grasp, Adrienne whispered. Their opinions are worthless to me. You aren't a debt, a weakness, or a chess piece. You're a human soul who deserved a life better than the one you were handed. I won't apologize for being your sanctuary. Even if it burns everything down around us, I'll stay right here. His palm covered hers. Last night wasn't some lapse in judgment, Serena. Please believe that. It wasn't a mistake for me either, she replied, gripping his hand like a lifeline. But I have to know the depth of the water I'm swimming in. If there are monsters coming for me to hurt you, they'll find I'm a lot harder to kill than they expect. Adrienne's eyes turned to cold flint. I swear to you, they won't breathe long enough to try. A sharp rap at the door broke the spell. Marcus stood there, his face carved from stone. Pardon the intrusion, but Detective Morris is downstairs. He says it's a matter of life and death. Morris looked haunted when they entered. He waved away the coffee. We have a situation, he grunted. Gregory Vale was nearly executed in his cell last night. Serena felt the floor tilt. Is he dead? Still breathing. 2 stabs, but the blade missed anything vital. He's in the infirmary under heavy guard. Morris tapped a pen against his ledger. The hitman was a lifer named Frank Cerno, just a common thug. Adrian narrowed his eyes. Let me guess. Cerno has ties to the people Vale betrayed. That's the hook. Cerno is singing. Claims someone on the outside bankrolled the hit. Says a middleman promised to set his family up for life if he silenced Vale forever. Did he fail completely? Serena asked. The guards intervened just in time. Morris leveled a weary stare at her. But whoever signed that check isn't going to stop until your father is in the ground. He's being shifted to high-security isolation, but walls only do so much. If the contract is high enough, someone will find a gap. Serena expected to feel a flicker of grief or perhaps a grim satisfaction. Instead, she felt a hollow, cold numbness. Why bring this to us? Because the district attorney thinks the trail might lead back to you, or to Adrian. Morris's eyes darted between the two of them. They're theorizing you wanted Vale dead before he could cut a deal with the state. That's madness, Serena snapped. Is it? Morris sounded more exhausted than accusatory. Look, I don't buy it. Neither does Adrian. He's too brilliant to use a prison rat for a messy hit, but the narrative looks poisoning for the public eye right now. Veal's defense team is already playing the victim card, claiming their client is being hunted by a private vendetta. Adrian's face was an unreadable mask. What do you require? Timestamps, phone logs, anything to prove you weren't pulling strings. You'll have it within the hour, Adrian promised. Anything else? Yeah, watch the shadows. Because whoever wanted Vale silenced might decide you're the next loose end. Once Morris departed, Serena paced the room like a caged animal while Adrian made frantic calls. Her brain was a whirlwind, listing every ghost from her father's past who might want him buried. The list was endless. Gregory had spent a lifetime making enemies, but the timing felt like a deliberate trap. Just as his empire collapsed, just as he was ready to spill the truth. Breathe, Adrian said, snapping his phone shut. Stop what? The spiral, I can feel the gears turning from across the room. Serena halted, turning her wide eyes toward him. Someone just tried to murder my father in a cage. The law thinks we are the monsters. How do I stay calm, knowing we're innocent but looking guilty? Because we have nothing to hide from the light. He closed the distance between them. Morris is just playing the game. He knows our hands are clean. Do we know who actually paid for the hit? I'm shaking the trees. If it's anyone in my circle, I'll find the source. If not, we wait for the facts. Adrian's phone vibrated again. He scowled at the screen. I have to take this. Can you hold the fort for a moment? I'll manage. But as the door clicked shut, the silence felt heavy. She felt stripped bare, more vulnerable than that first night in the rain. Someone was powerful enough to reach through iron bars and nearly kill a man. If they turned that focus on her, she retreated to the library, hoping a book would anchor her mind, but the ink just blurred into a mess of static and fear. Vincent's poison kept echoing in her ears. This world eats girls like you alive. Elena slipped into the room an hour later. You okay? That seems to be everyone's favorite question lately. That's because you look like a piece of glass about to shatter. Elena sat across from her, her voice soft. Tell me what's happening. Serena spilled everything. The blood in the cell, the police, the growing rot. Elena absorbed the news in silence, her eyes thoughtful. You're terrified the crosshairs are moving to you, Elena noted when the story ended. Shouldn't I be? Most likely. But fear and stupidity are two different animals. You're under Adrian's wing now. In this city, that's a fortress. Serena looked away. Vincent didn't seem to think much of that fortress. Elena let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Vincent is a bottom feeder who hates that Adrian still has a soul. Ignore the snake. Adrian said they used to be close. Keyword, used to. People reveal their true colors eventually, or you just stop making excuses for them. Elena leaned in closer. Listen to me. I've been by Adrian's side for 8 long years. I've watched him do things that would steal your sleep. But I've also seen him bleed to protect the forgotten. He isn't a saint, but he's far from a devil, and he loves you. It's written all over him. That's the part that haunts me, Serena confessed. What if his love is the thing that breaks him? That's his burden to carry, not your cross to bear. Elena rose. Come. Drowning in your thoughts won't save a soul. Let's find something tangible to do. Serena followed her into the warmth of the kitchen, where Elena handed her a knife and a pile of vegetables. The rhythm of the blade against the wood was hypnotic, a simple task to tether her to the present. They worked in a quiet, peaceful bubble for a long while before Elena spoke. Can I ask you something honest? Go ahead. What do you desire? Not Adrian's wants, not the law's demands, not even the scales of justice. What does your heart actually crave? Serena paused, staring at the onion she was dicing. I want to feel the weight leave my shoulders. I want to stop flinching. I want my father to answer for his sins. But mostly, she hesitated, her voice trembling. I want to grow something. Not just outrun the shadows, but actually feel the sun. I want to live. That's a beautiful start. Elena tipped the carrots into the simmering pot. And where does Adrian fit into that garden? I'm still figuring that out. Serena lowered the knife. A month ago, I was a ghost. Now I have choices, and I'm feeling things again. It's horrifying. Feelings usually are. What if I'm just broken? What if this is just some trauma-fueled reflex? What if I only care because he pulled me from the wreck? Elena offered a gentle smile. And what if it isn't? What if it's just real, messy, and worth the pain? Before Serena could find the words, Marcus appeared. Adrian requires both of you, now. They found Adrian in his sanctuary, flanked by 3 unfamiliar shadows. The room felt heavy, charged with a lethal static. Adrian's features were chiseled from cold granite. Leave us, Serena, Elena, he commanded. No, Serena countered, her own defiance startling her. If this concerns me, I'm staying. Adrian looked ready to strike back, but a stranger spoke first. Let her stay. She needs the truth. The man looked young, perhaps early 30s, but his knuckles were scarred and his eyes had seen a lifetime of ghosts. He gave Serena a look of grim appreciation. Tony, he introduced himself. I handle security for the East Side. Someone signed your father's death warrant 2 days ago. 500,000 for a clean hit. 1 million if they make it look like a tragic mishap. Serena's blood turned to ice. Who? Silence filled the room. Tony looked at Adrian. It went through a ghost. Anonymous cash. But the middleman? He's a Castellano regular. Adrian's jaw tightened. Marco Castellano. That would be my guess. Who's Marco? Serena asked. Your father's primary backer, Adrian explained. Or he was, until the fraud cost him 20 million, now he wants blood. Tony shook his head. He wants silence. Your father alive means testimony and exposure. Dead? He's just a ghost story. He becomes a warning, and Marco keeps his name out of the headlines. An older, gray-haired man finally spoke. There is more. Castellano is hunting for this girl. He's mapping her life, where she sleeps, who watches her, every step she takes. The room went deathly still. He's coming for me, Serena whispered. It wasn't a question. Perhaps, Adrian replied, his voice a cautious murmur. Or he's just sizing us up. Either way, we aren't rolling the dice. You don't leave this compound without a full escort. We double the guard, burnish the security, and ensure the world knows you're untouchable. Adrian's tone was pure steel. And then, I'm having a word with Marco about where he draws the line. No, Serena snapped. You can't risk it for me. I'm not attacking him, Serena. I'm negotiating. This is my reality, Serena. This is how my world operates. Sometimes a conversation stops a war, sometimes it doesn't. But I have to try. The men departed after a few grim details. Serena faced him. Don't die for me. I'm not dying. I'm taking control. I'm stopping a fire before it spreads. He needs to know you're protected, and touching you means going through me. Adrian stepped into her space. In my world, silence is weakness. If I don't answer a threat, people die. I won't let that be you. I don't want anyone to bleed. Neither do I. That's why I'm talking first, he whispered, his fingers brushing her cheek. Trust me. She wanted to find a safer path, but she saw the truth now. His life wasn't just gold and shadows. It was a tightrope walk between a handshake and a bullet. When? Tonight. Marcus is handling the logistics. I'm going. Absolutely not. Adrian's voice was a final, cold snap. I won't debate this. You stay behind these walls where you're safe. I go, I handle it, and I come home. End of story. Serena knew arguing was useless. Fine. But you better come back. He left at 8, flanked by Marcus and a few silent enforcers. She watched the taillights fade, her stomach churning. Elena appeared beside her with a tray. He'll return. He always does. He's survived 100 nights like this. It doesn't make the waiting easier. No, but it's who he is. Elena offered the cup. You have to decide if you can breathe in this atmosphere. The danger is part of the man. It never leaves. Serena tasted the sweet warmth of honey. Did you ever have to choose? No, I knew the job. But you were thrown into the deep end. I don't know if I can do this, Serena confessed, loving a man who lives on a knife's edge. Decide soon, Elena warned softly, because he's already falling. Everyone sees it. If you can't carry his world, walk away before it breaks you both. Those words weighed like lead. Serena remembered his touch, the safety he provided, and the crushing dread when he left. Could she build a life in the shadow of his enemies? 2 hours of agonizing silence passed before the engines rumbled. Serena met him at the threshold, scanning for any sign of violence. I'm whole, he said before she could speak. What happened? Let me breathe first. In the office, he poured 2 heavy glasses of whiskey. He downed half his glass. Marco and I found middle ground. He drops the hit on your father and stops hunting you. In exchange, I overlook his part in the old scams. We shook hands. He knows I'm bad for business, and I know a war helps no one. Relief didn't come. Adrian's eyes were too heavy. What's the rest? He set his glass down with a soft click. Marco had a parting gift for you. He said a bullet would have been mercy for Gregory. What's coming in the courts? That's the real hell. He told me to tell you that. Is he right? Probably. Your father will die in a cage, his name a curse, his power gone. For a king like him, that's a fate worse than a grave. Serena's voice was a cold whisper. Good. Let him rot. I want him to feel it all. Does that make me a monster? It makes you human, Adrian whispered, closing the gap. But Serena, don't let the hate eat you. It'll poison the well of your own life eventually. I know, she murmured, leaning into his warmth. I'm just not there yet. You have time. They stayed there, 2 souls adrift in the dark, sharing a weight they couldn't name. Eventually, he pulled back, searching her eyes. I need the truth. Are you here by choice, or because you're trapped? Why ask that now? Because I have to know. If you're here out of debt or fear, tell me. I need to stop my heart before it's too late. Serena's breath hitched. You're falling for me? Yes, he said, no shadow of doubt in his voice. Since the night you broke your father's world, I saw your strength in the wreckage. I'm falling, and it'll destroy me if you aren't in this for the right reasons. And what are they? That you want this, that when you look ahead, you see me. That you want to fight for this, he said, gesturing to the air between them. Serena thought of Elena's morning. What did she truly want, beyond the fear and the logic? I'm terrified, she admitted, of your world, the guns, the shadows. I'm scared I'm not enough, or that my past has broken me too deeply, but she took a shaky breath. I'm staying, because a life without you feels like a half-finished story. It's not just thanks, Adrian, it's real. I don't have a name for it yet. He leaned in, forehead against hers. That's enough for tonight. Is it? Yeah, we'll find the way. The kiss was slow, a promise written in the dark. As they pulled apart, Serena felt the shift. She had crossed the line. There was no going back now. Whatever storms were coming, they'd weather them together. The trial, her father's fall, the foundation she dreamed of, it was all waiting. But tonight she was safe. Safe in the arms of a dangerous man, building a new world on the ruins of the old. They weren't perfect, but they were alive. The trial opened on a somber, gray morning in October, 3 months after she'd pulled the thread that unraveled her father's empire. She wore navy, a suit Adrian had chosen, and wore her strength like armor. She wasn't that broken girl anymore. Adrian took the wheel himself, steering her toward the halls of justice while Marcus trailed behind in a separate vehicle with a couple of guards whose faces Serena still struggled to distinguish. Outside, the press had gathered like a pack of wolves, their lenses and microphones forming a suffocating gauntlet. "Are you holding up?" Adrian murmured, his fingers interlacing with hers. "Not in the slightest," she whispered, "but I am stepping into the fire anyway." Stepping onto the pavement, they were swallowed by a cacophony of shouts and blinding camera flashes. Serena stared straight ahead, anchored only by Adrian's steady palm on her spine as they carved a path through the mob. Shards of jagged questions pierced the air. "Miss Vale, give us a word. Is it true you're under Adrian Russo's roof? Do you want to see your father face the needle?" Inside, the air was heavy, the silence far more suffocating than the noise outside. Linda Hartwell, a prosecutor with eyes like flint, intercepted them in the corridor. "How is the soul holding up?" she asked softly. Serena managed a brittle smile. "I have seen better days." Linda leaned in, her gaze unwavering. "You take the stand today. The defense is going to try to paint you as a fractured woman, unstable, seeking blood. Stand your ground." The lawyer's voice was a mix of iron and empathy. "Just give them the truth. That is our only weapon." The room was a sea of faces. Serena scanned the gallery, spotting the hollowed-out victims of her father's greed and old associates who now sat as far away as possible, as if his ruin were contagious. And there, stripped of his expensive suits and ego, sat Gregory Vale. In that orange jumpsuit, he looked like a ghost, smaller, brittle, and drained of his former majesty. His hair had turned the color of ash, and deep lines of bitterness were etched around his mouth. When his eyes locked onto hers, they weren't filled with regret, but a volatile mix of fury and a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like terror. "Good. Let him feel the walls closing in." The judge took her bench, a silver-haired woman with a face that had seen every lie in the book and remained entirely unimpressed. The proceedings opened with a clinical dissection of his sins. Linda laid out the map of his betrayal, the fraud, the stolen millions, the physical cruelty, and finally the attempt on his own daughter's life. It was a mountain of paper and blood. Then came Richard Porter, the defense's silver-tongued shark, who tried to spin a different yarn. He spoke of a titan of industry being dismantled by criminals, and a daughter whose mind had supposedly fractured under the weight of her own issues. He wanted the jury to see Gregory as the prey, not the predator. Serena's knuckles went white. Beside her, Adrian's thumb traced rhythmic, grounding circles on her wrist. The morning was a dry parade of accountants detailing the labyrinth of shell companies and stolen dreams. It was a slog of numbers and technicalities, yet vital. Serena watched the jury, seeing some drown in the complexity, while others grew visibly incensed as the theft became clear. Then the human cost arrived. A teacher who had lost her entire retirement. A business owner whose life's work had vanished. A charity head whose mission was gutted. Each witness added a new weight to the room until the air felt thick with grief. Gregory remained a statue through the onslaught, only leaning over to whisper poison into his lawyer's ear. Serena wondered if he was still looking for a trap door, or if he finally realized the floor had already fallen out. When the judge called for the noon recess, the tension didn't leave. It just simmered. Adrian guided her to a secluded room, a small sanctuary away from the prying eyes of the world. "Breathe," he said, offering her some water. "I'm trying," she replied, her hands trembling as she took the bottle. "I always knew he was a monster, but hearing the wreckage he left behind, it is different when you see the faces of the people he destroyed. He didn't just steal money, he stole lives." "He broke so many people," she whispered, "myself included." After a quiet sip, she added, "Linda wants me on the stand this afternoon, a change of plans to keep my words fresh in their minds before the weekend break." Adrian sat close, his presence a heavy shield. "You don't have to go through with this, Serena. You can walk away, take the fifth, and stay silent." "No," she said, setting the water aside with newfound resolve. "I have to do this. He needs to look me in the eye and realize his shadow no longer scares me." When the court resumed, Serena walked the longest miles of her life to the witness box. She placed her hand on a Bible she didn't trust and swore to tell a truth she had lived in secret for 24 years. Linda began with the gentle basics, the history, the names, the dates. Then the questions turned into knives. "Miss Vale, tell the court about the man who raised you." Serena took a steadying breath. "He was my father in name only. When my mother passed when I was 14, the mask he wore didn't just slip, it shattered." "He stopped pretending to be human," she continued. "He became a storm of violence. I tried to become invisible, but it never worked. A loud footstep, a grade that wasn't perfect, or just the sin of existing was enough to set him off." Linda pushed for a specific memory. "When I was 16, I missed a dry cleaning pickup. He hit me so hard I flew into a wall. I ended up with a concussion," she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. "He told the doctors I took a tumble down the stairs." The defense leaped up, shouting about relevance. Linda countered, stating it proved a decade-long pattern that culminated in his attempt to kill her. The judge allowed it, and Linda led her through a brutal timeline of fractured ribs and split lips. She spoke of the terror that had become her only constant. Serena didn't let a single tear fall, delivering the facts like a coroner performing an autopsy on her own childhood. She felt the jury's collective gasp, their pity, their anger. Then the insurance policy was brought into the light. "Were you aware, Miss Vale, that your life was worth $2 million to your father?" "Not until the police told me," she replied. "How did that realization feel?" "Like a death sentence. It meant every blow, every scream. And the moment he handed me over to Adriana Russo was all part of a plan to cash in on my corpse." Porter's objection for speculation was sustained, but the damage was done. Linda adjusted her approach. "Did he ever threaten you directly?" "Frequently, but 6 weeks before I was taken to the Russo estate, he had been drinking heavily. He looked at me and said that even trash has its price, and sometimes things are more profitable dead than alive." Serena paused. Then he just laughed. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Even the defense looked shaken. "What did you take that to mean?" Linda asked softly. "I realized that to him, I wasn't a daughter." Serena's voice flickered for a second before hardening. "I was just an asset he was waiting to liquidate." After a few more questions, Linda stepped back and the shark approached. Porter stood, adjusting his suit with a predatory grace, a condescending smirk plastered on his face. "Quite a performance, Miss Vale. Very moving, very dramatic." He leaned in, his voice dripping with false sincerity. But tell me, is any of this actually grounded in reality? Linda objected immediately, but Porter didn't care. The seed of doubt was his only goal. Isn't it true you have a history of psychological instability? He pivoted. I saw a counselor after losing my mother, Serena corrected. Grief isn't a mental illness. And yet, you were on a cocktail of pills for depression and anxiety, correct? Yes, she answered firmly, because I was being terrorized in my own home. Or perhaps because you were a volatile teenager and your father was simply trying to manage you. Porter countered, waving a file. I see here a brief stay in a psychiatric ward at 17. Doesn't that scream unstable to you? Serena gripped the chair, her knuckles white. I was there because I tried to end my life. Death felt like the only escape from him. That isn't instability. That's a cry for help. Or it's the sign of a woman who needs someone to blame for her own failures, Porter sneered. Isn't it more likely you've crafted this tragedy to justify your alliance with a criminal like Adrian Russo? That you're just a vengeful daughter trying to burn your father down? No, Serena's voice was like ice. That is not how this went, Porter chuckled. How convenient that you turn on him exactly when his business fails and he owes money to your new protector. It almost feels scripted. It wasn't a script, she snapped. 9 years of beatings and a hit on my life aren't a narrative. They are the scars I carry every single day. But we only have your word, don't we? Porter challenged. No police calls, no witnesses to these alleged beatings. Just your story against a father's love. Those old medical records. They could be from falls, accidents, or even self-inflicted wounds. He leaned against the box, looming over her. The truth is, you're a broken girl who found a powerful man to buy into your delusions for his own gain. Isn't that the real story? A white-hot rage ignited in Serena's chest. She looked past the lawyer, locking eyes with the man in the orange suit, the man who had haunted her every dream. And for the first time, she wasn't the one who was afraid. Serena scanned the jury, watching the seeds of uncertainty Porter tried to scatter. The reality? Her voice was a steady, haunting whisper. For 9 years, my father dismantled my soul. He crushed me until I felt like nothing. And when my existence became an inconvenience, he put a price on my head just to save his own skin. That is the cold truth. No smear campaign can erase it. Porter's smugness faltered. I'm not attacking you, he stammered. You are. You're painting me as a lunatic to hide the monster behind you, but I'm just a girl who stopped being afraid to speak. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Porter tried to regain his footing with a few hollow questions, but Serena remained unshakable. The damage to the defense was irreversible. When Linda took over for the final look, she kept the moment brief and piercing. Miss Vale, why come here today? Because I needed him to understand he no longer owns my story. I wanted every soul he broke to see that they aren't invisible, that the truth still carries weight. With that, her time on the stand ended. Her legs felt like glass as she returned to Adrian. He caught her hand instantly, grounding her while her body surged with a chaotic mix of terror and triumph. You were incredible, he breathed. I wanted to end him, she admitted. I saw it. But you stayed strong, and that's the real victory. The prosecution finished their play. The following week, the defense brought in witnesses to paint Gregory as a saintly businessman. Their words rang like hollow bells after Serena's testimony. On Tuesday, the man himself finally stepped into the light. Serena watched the mask slide on. He played the part of the grieving widower, a father pushed to the edge by debt. He even managed a few practiced tears while mourning his troubled daughter. It was a masterful, sickening performance, almost convincing if you hadn't lived through his nightmare. Then Linda Hartwell moved in for the kill. Mr. Vale, you claim to be a victim, yet let's look at the scars. She opened a folder containing records from her 16-year severe head trauma. You told doctors she fell down the stairs, didn't you? Is that the lie you chose? That's what she told me, he hissed. So your child lied about her own agony? Gregory's face hardened. She was a difficult girl, desperate for attention. Maybe she did it to herself. A self-inflicted concussion while you were out at a 5-star dinner? Convenient timing for a father's absence. Linda stepped into his personal space. Let's discuss the $2 million policy you bought on her life just 3 months before the attempt. Why? Standard financial security, he replied, his voice thinning. Protecting my interests. Interests? You mean your daughter? That's a misinterpretation, is it? Because your emails tell a different story. Linda held up a printout. To your advisor, you wrote, "The girl might be the only way out of this mess. Tell us, Mr. Vale, what was the girl worth to you?" I meant she could find work, he shouted, his composure shattering. A job with a $2 million payout? Linda didn't blink. I'm quoting you. Now, did you hire Jimmy Rohr to execute her? Never. Funny. Mr. Rohr says you did. He's prepared to testify that you handed over $25,000 to stage a fatal accident. He's a liar, Gregory spat. Why lie? He's facing a life sentence. His only hope is the truth. What possible reason would he have to frame an innocent man? Gregory fell silent. His attorney tried to intervene, but the momentum was lost. You're silent because the truth is indefensible, Linda pressed. You bought a life, then tried to sell it to cover your debts. That's the story, isn't it? No, he whispered, but the fire in his eyes had gone out. Linda continued her surgical dismantling until the man beneath the suit was exposed as a desperate, cornered animal. The defense finally gave up. Days later, closing arguments arrived. Linda was a force of nature, weaving every lie into a noose. Porter's final plea was a weak attempt to salvage a sinking ship. The jury vanished for 6 grueling hours. Serena waited in a side room with Adrian, her mind a storm of what-ifs. What if he walks? She cried. Enough, Adrian said, pulling her close. You're spiraling. Breathe. He held her through the tremors of anxiety. We faced the outcome together no matter what. The phone rang at 4:30. The verdict was in. Back in the box, Serena felt her heart thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. The jurors returned with stony faces. The judge called for the reading. Fraud, guilty. Embezzlement, guilty. The list went on, a drumbeat of justice. Then came the big one, attempted murder. Guilty. The courtroom transformed into a sea of noise. Cameras flashed, and the gallery erupted in a mixture of sobs and shouts. Gregory began a frantic, desperate protest until the judge's gavel silenced the room. Serena heard nothing but a deafening roar in her mind. It was finally, truly over. He was never coming home. Adrian wrapped an arm around her, and the dam finally broke. 2 weeks later, the gavel fell one last time. 40 years for the money and life without parole for the blood. Cold, hard, and final. Gregory Vale would take his last breath behind bars. As they let him out, he tried to catch her eye, but the guards shoved him forward. Serena felt nothing. No joy, just a vast, hollow space where her fear used to reside. "It's done," Linda whispered. "We finished it," Serena corrected. Outside, a wall of reporters waited. Supported by Adrian, she stepped toward the microphones, her hands trembling as she unfolded her statement. "My father was a man who traded souls for profit," she began. "He stole more than money. He stole peace. Today, the truth finally won. This isn't just about a prison cell, it's about the fact that abuse has an ending. I hope everyone he touched finds their way to the light now." She retreated to the car before the shouting began. In the sanctuary of the back seat, she let out a breath she'd been holding for a lifetime. "Are you okay?" Adrian asked softly. "I thought I'd feel lighter," she admitted. "But I'm just exhausted." "That's the weight of the world leaving your shoulders," he said, taking her hand. "It takes time to learn how to breathe again." That night, sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the shadows on the ceiling, haunted by the ghost of the trial. Victory felt like ash. She wandered down to the library, finding Adrian bathed in the glow of a single lamp. "Restless?" he asked. "Yeah." She slumped into the chair opposite him, feeling the heavy silence of the house. "Did revenge fix it for you? With your sister?" Adrian closed his book. "It gave me an ending, but it didn't change the beginning." "Why?" "Because I thought seeing him in chains would make me feel whole, but I still feel like a ghost." "You aren't a ghost, Serena. You're a survivor in the middle of a long winter." Adrian sat beside her. "Healing isn't a straight line. Some days you'll feel strong, others you'll feel the weight of it all. But you're moving." "It is the only way forward." "Is that how you managed when your sister passed?" "In time, I suppose. I eventually learned to shoulder the weight without letting it crush my soul." Serena leaned into him, drawing strength from his warmth. "What becomes of us now? The courtroom is behind us, and I no longer have to live in the shadows. I could simply vanish and find a new beginning. Is that your wish?" "No, but I refuse to be your anchor." Adrienne gently cupped her chin, tilting her gaze to meet his. "You are never a burden. You are..." He paused, grasping for the right sentiment. "You are the single best thing to cross my path in an age. I realize our timing is fractured, born from the absolute worst circumstances. But I cannot let you walk away. What do you truly want? I want you here. Build the sanctuary you've dreamed of. Protect those who have nowhere to turn. Let me be a part of that mission. Let me be part of your world." Serena kissed him with a slow, aching depth, pouring every unspoken word into that single touch. Breaking the embrace, she rested her brow against his. "I am staying," she whispered. "Not for lack of options, and not out of some fearful obligation. I choose this because I want you. You are the foundation of the future I am crafting." "Does that suffice?" "Yes," Adrian murmured softly. "That suffices perfectly." They lingered there for a long time, lost in each other while the library's silence held the world at bay. Tomorrow would bring its own trials, establishing the house, navigating their hearts, and discovering what a normal life looks like after the storm. But for tonight, this peace was enough. Serena had outlasted the nightmare. She had finally fought back. Now, at last, she could begin to actually live. The structure was a ruin when Serena first laid eyes on it. Broken glass, flaking skin, and a main door gasping on its hinges. It stood lonely near the industrial docks, choked by rusted wire and weeds that had swallowed the pavement. The agent was full of apologies, offering glossier, easier buildings to see. But standing in that neglected lot, Serena saw a vision. She saw rooms bathed in morning light, sanctuaries where women could sleep in peace, and a kitchen for sharing survival stories, a place where agony could be forged into hope. "This is the one," she declared. Adrian, standing by with his hands buried in his pockets, arched a skeptical brow. "Are you certain?" "It is a wreck." "As was I," she countered. "And you never gave up on me." A soft smile touched his lips. "Fair point. When do we start the demolition?" The agent blinked in shock. "You are buying it without even stepping inside?" "We will take it," Adrian stated firmly. "Prepare the contracts." That had been 4 months ago. Now, in the first breath of spring, Serena stood on that same ground and barely saw the ghost of the old ruin. The wire fence was gone, traded for a low stone gate that actually worked. The weeds had surrendered to gardens of summer blooms and vegetables for the residents to harvest. The building itself had been hollowed out and completely reborn. Every corner was crafted with deep intention. Haven House. That was the name they chose. Honest, simple, and true. Elena emerged from the front entrance clutching a clipboard. "The furniture trucks have arrived. Where should we place the beds?" "Second floor, suites 3 through 8. We will figure out the rest as we go." Serena followed her in, still awed by the transformation. The ground floor featured a vast common area with plush seating, a kitchen built for communal healing, and offices for those doing the heavy lifting of counseling. Upstairs sat 12 private refugees, each designed to feel like a sanctuary rather than a shelter. They had worked without rest. Adrian provided the seed money, but Serena fought for every grant, navigating the nonprofit world with the same grit she used to outlive her father's cruelty. It had been a long road. Some still looked at her and saw only the daughter of a monster, doubting if she was stable enough for such a burden. But she silenced them with action. Time and again, she showed up and made the dream a reality. Adriana appeared in the doorway then, Marcus following close behind. Both men were loaded down with heavy boxes. "Where do you want these? What is the cargo?" "Bedding, I believe." Elena ordered 1,000 items, and I have lost count. Serena chuckled. "Stash them in the supply room for now. We will sort them later." He set the load down, stretching his weary back. "How are the nerves for tomorrow?" Tomorrow was the grand opening. They had invited the city's leaders and advocates to witness the birth of Haven House. It was about to become public and real. "I am terrified," Serena confessed. "What if the house remains empty? What if nobody comes? They will come. You have seen the files. 8 women are already waiting for a safe bed." "I know, but what if I fail them? What if I am not up to this task?" Adrian stepped close, anchoring her hands in his. "Then you will learn. You will stumble, you will fix it, and you will keep moving. That is your nature." She desperately wanted to believe him, to feel like a leader instead of a girl one mistake away from proving her critics right. But the shadow of fear was always there, lurking in the corners. A car crunched on the gravel. It was Sarah Chen, the reporter from the trial. Sarah had stayed close, checking in often, and had requested to cover the story of the opening. "I will handle the tour," Elena offered, going out to greet the journalist. "You two finish up in here." Once they were alone, Serena and Adrian worked in a comfortable, rhythmic silence, checking off the final tasks of an endless list. The work was mundane, almost domestic, and it hit Serena how much her world had shifted in under a year. She had gone from a ghost to a survivor, then to a builder, someone who actually mattered. "Can I ask you something?" she said. breaking the quiet. Always? Do you ever regret taking me in that night? After everything that followed? Adrian set his box aside and looked at her with total focus. No, never once. Even though it made your life a battlefield. My life was already a war zone. You just gave me a reason to fight for something better. He crossed the room to her. Serena, knowing you changed my own trajectory. It made me weigh what I wanted my legacy to be. An empire of fear, or something that actually healed the broken. Do not tell me you are going completely legitimate in me, she teased. He laughed, a rare, genuine sound. Not entirely. But I am shifting things, closing the darker chapters and redirecting my reach. Marcus thinks I have lost my edge. Have you? Perhaps. Or maybe I just finally realized what is worth holding on to. He cupped her cheek, his palm warm. This sanctuary you are building, it is vital. More important than anything I have done with my life. You are helping build it too, she reminded him. You have the vision and the heart. I am just the one providing the means. Serena leaned into his hand. They had spent months navigating the jagged space between their past and their potential. It was never easy. Adrian's world still held a darkness that occasionally kept her awake with worry. And she was still mending, still learning to let someone into her heart without the terror of being shattered. But they were both trying, two imperfect souls building something real. I love you, she whispered. The admission still felt raw and vulnerable. She had only said it once before, in the hollow of a night after a nightmare, finding him there as her anchor. I love you too, he kissed her brow gently. Now, come on. We have another 100 crates to unpack before the sun rises. The opening was smaller than she imagined, yet it felt infinitely more profound. The mayor spoke of community and hope. A state advocate discussed the desperate need for light in the city's cracks. Then it was Serena's turn. She stood at the small podium in the garden, looking out at the 50 guests gathered on folding chairs. Adrian sat in the front row, a silent pillar of strength beside Elena and Marcus. Sarah Chen stood nearby with her camera rolling, and scattered through the crowd were women who shared Serena's history, who knew the weight of this moment. I am not practiced at speeches, Serena began, earning a few soft smiles. I have no degrees in management or business. 6 months ago, I was barely a person. My father spent a lifetime trying to erase my existence, and for a long time, I believed I was invisible. She paused, finding her voice. But then something shifted. I found people who looked at me and saw a soul worth saving, people who gave me the room to heal and the weapons to fight. And I realized I am not the only one trapped in that silence. There are so many women who think there is no escape. Her eyes found Adrian's. He gave a small, encouraging nod. Haven House is here to tell them they are wrong. There is a way out, and you matter. We are not perfect, and we will make mistakes. We will learn as we go, but we are here, and we are not leaving. Serena's voice rang out with power. This house is proof that surviving is not the end of the journey. It is only the beginning, and whatever comes next, you do not have to walk that road alone. The applause was a thunderous wave. Serena stepped down, trembling, and Adrian was there instantly, his hand steadying her in the light. A job well done, he whispered, a hint of pride masking the exhaustion. No tears tonight, just a quiet victory. As the guests wandered through the fresh hallways, Serena played her part, masking the crushing pressure of what came next. 8 souls. 8 lives seeking refuge under her watch starting next week. The weight was immense, A stranger approached, her face etched with a decade more weariness than Serena's. Michelle, a veteran of the city's overcrowded shelters, spoke with a desperate sincerity. "We are bursting at the seams," she admitted. "This sanctuary, it is a lifeline." Serena whispered a prayer of hope, but Michelle insisted, 15 years of frontline trauma backing her words. She spoke of the shadows, the women who vanish when the doors remain shut, forced back into the arms of their tormentors or swallowed by the cold pavement. Michelle's grip was firm, a silent transfer of strength. "You've created a third path," she urged. When the silence finally reclaimed the house and the crowds vanished, Serena collapsed onto the steps, finally drawing a long, jagged breath. The horizon bled into shades of fire and dusk. Soon, these empty rooms would echo with the stories of those piecing their lives back together, mirroring her own journey. Adrian appeared at her side, offering a simple bottle of water. "How is the heart?" he asked softly. Serena sighed. "Check back in 1 month when the real storm begins." He smiled, certain of her inner steel. "You can't be sure," she doubted. But he knew. He saw the scars she wore as armor, the lived experience that would be her greatest asset. His arm settled over her, a warm anchor. "Your stubborn heart and brilliant mind won't let you fail," he promised. Leaning into him, she wondered about their own fragile future, about the 70-hour weeks and the inevitable crises. "Then I become your shadow," he replied. "I will be the one reminding you to eat when the world demands too much," he whispered against her hair. He made it sound so effortless, a simple pact. Yet Serena knew the truth. Love is a battlefield, particularly when both soldiers are survivors of a different war. Perhaps, she thought, that shared struggle was exactly what they needed. Perfection was a ghost, only endurance mattered. That Tuesday, Jackie arrived, 26 years old, with a single bag and a fading, multicolored bruise marking her face. Her children were hidden away for safety while she sought her own. She had finally fled the man who had nearly beaten the life out of her 3 times too many. Serena guided her to the second floor, a quiet witness to the woman's disbelief. Jackie stared at the pristine walls and the bed, her fingers trembling as she touched the curtains she could finally pull shut against the world. "Is there no price?" she whispered. Serena looked her in the eyes. "It is yours for as long as it takes to heal," offering a packet of resources, lawyers, therapists, a way forward. Serena promised they would navigate the fog together. "But I am lost," Jackie confessed, tears blurring her vision. She spoke of the poison her husband had poured into her ears, that she was nothing, a ghost without his shadow, abandoned by a world that did not care. He had convinced her she earned every blow. "He lied," Serena countered, her voice like iron. When asked how she could be so sure, the truth spilled out. "Because my own blood told me the same lies, and I wore them for a lifetime." She sat beside the broken woman. "The road back to yourself is agonizing. Some days the familiar hell will feel safer than the unknown heaven. There will be moments you want to surrender to the dark, but you won't." Jackie looked up, searching Serena's eyes. Are you finally whole?" Serena paused. The nightmares still visited. The ghost of a flinch still lingered. But she had found a calling, a sanctuary of her own making. She wasn't just surviving. She was finally architecting her own destiny. "I am getting there," she admitted, 1 heartbeat at a time. The weeks brought more ghosts to her door. Maria, who had been erased by an isolating lover. Tanya, stripped of every scent before her desperate flight. Lisa, a 19-year-old child carrying a child of her own. Each woman arrived with a unique map of trauma, etched in silence and survival. Serena held space for every tragedy, weaving a web of support through the exhaustion. Yet, amidst the heartbreak, small miracles bloomed. Jackie found work in a hospital ward. Maria reached out to the mother she thought she had lost. And then there was Tanya. The sound of her laughter echoing in the halls was a symphony Serena never tired of hearing. The burden was heavier than she had dreamed. Every decision felt like life or death. 3 weeks in, she returned to the manor, bone-weary. Adrienne was there, the quiet domesticity of the kitchen a sharp contrast to the chaos she had left behind. He took one look at her face and saw the storm brewing within. "Rough shift," he ventured. "A soul was lost tonight," she whispered, collapsing into a seat. She went back to him. "I gave her everything, reason, hope, safety, and she still chose the fire." She spiraled into guilt, wondering where she had failed. Adrian paused his cooking, his gaze steady as he sat before her, offering the comfort of his presence. "You aren't a savior for the unwilling," he said gently. "Some need to graze the very bottom before they find the strength to rise. It isn't your defeat." To her, it felt like a morning. "You provide the door," he reminded her, squeezing her hand. "But they are the ones who must decide to walk through it." "How many stayed?" he asked. 11. 11 lives still fighting." "Then let their progress be your focus," he urged. "Don't let one shadow darken the light of the 11. The advice was sound, yet the ache remained. As the seasons bled into summer, the house found its heartbeat, bolstered by a professional team that Serena carefully curated. Bridges were built with local businesses, opening doors for women with fractured pasts. A childcare network flourished, allowing mothers to reclaim their independence. These tiny triumphs coalesced into a steady rhythm. For the first time, the imposter syndrome faded. Serena realized she wasn't just dreaming, she was building a lasting legacy. Her bond with Adrian deepened, trading the initial fire for a reliable, warming glow. He began to untangle himself from the shadows of his industry. A slow metamorphosis she watched with quiet hope. He was learning to wield his influence as a shield rather than a weapon, striving for a version of himself that deserved her. Under the heat of a July dusk, a heavy silence hung between them on the terrace. "What is weighing on you?" she prodded. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the dying light. "The future," he confessed. "Everything we have woven together. I keep wondering if you are ready to make this forever." Her pulse quickened. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box, revealing a solitary diamond that caught the moonlight. "Marry me," he requested, his voice thick with emotion. "Not as a debt or a refuge, but as an equal. I want to build a world with you, no matter what shape it takes." The word marriage echoed in her mind, a concept she had long ago discarded as impossible. Trust had always been a luxury she could not afford, but he had walked through her darkest valleys and never let go. He had seen the broken shards and helped her forge them into something beautiful. "Yes," she breathed, the word a soft release of a long-held tension. As the ring found its home on her finger, their kiss felt like the start of an era. By September, they stood in the garden, exchanging vows under the witness of Elena and Marcus, a small, intimate gathering of those who had seen their transformation. Sarah Chen was there, not for a headline, but as a sister in arms. The women of the shelter sat alongside Adrian as reformed colleagues and the new allies Serena had made in the advocacy world. It was a mosaic of a life, unconventional perhaps, but profoundly real. It was a celebration of their unique truth. Serena clutched a bouquet of flowers grown in the sanctuary she had built, her dress a simple testament to her grace. Adrian's gaze never left her, his eyes full of a singular devotion. They spoke of partnership and purpose, promising to be each other's foundation in a shifting world. As they were declared one, the cheers were a chorus of shared joy. Husband. The title felt heavy and sweet. A profound stillness finally took root in her soul. It wasn't just love. It was the realization that she had finally chosen her own path, leaving the ghosts of her past behind for a future she owned. String lights flickered as the night air hummed with music. She danced with her love, with Marcus, and with Jackie, now more a friend than a resident. She savored the sweet moments, allowing herself the rare luxury of pure happiness. Eventually, she retreated to that same terrace, seeking a moment of quiet reflection under the stars. The velvet sky was punctuated by starlight while the distant echoes of laughter lingered. Elena appeared, offering a toast to the new bride. "How is the view from here?" she asked. "Beautiful and terrifying," Serena admitted. "That is the secret," Elena laughed, clinking their glasses. "You have achieved something remarkable this year. We all did. The sanctuary, this haven house. It might never have risen from the dust without your hand in mine." Elena's gaze drifted toward the sleeping gardens, her voice a soft echo of the past. She whispered about that fateful night. The night your father delivered you into this world of shadows. Life is a game of inches, a series of what-ifs that could have ended in ruin. But you didn't break. You endured. You struck back against the dark. Out of the wreckage of a nightmare, you sculpted something breathtaking. Elena turned, her eyes searching for the source of such rare fortification. It takes a certain kind of soul to transmute poison into peace. Most would have folded. You felt hollow, perhaps, but you kept moving. That is the only definition of bravery that matters. Then Adrian's warmth enveloped Serena, his whisper grounding her in the present. "They are searching for you," he said. "Let the world wait," she replied, "just for a moment." She melted into his embrace, anchored by the stillness of the second. This was her center. The months following their vows weren't easy. They were a season of grueling evolution. Her vision for the shelter bloomed into something larger, a permanent foundation for those seeking more than a temporary escape from the storm. She recruited a dedicated circle, forged alliances with the ivory towers of academia, and built bridges where there were once only walls. Then came the public stage, conferences and interviews where she peeled back her own skin to show the world her scars. At first, the exposure felt like a fresh wound. But then the echoes started coming back. After every speech, a stranger would find her in the shadows to whisper 2 words, "Thank you." They recognized their own agony in her voice, and in that shared pain, the isolation began to dissolve. That connection was the fuel. Meanwhile, Adrian was navigating his own quiet purgatory, slowly severing the veins of his old dark empire. He was planting seeds in legitimate soil now. It wasn't a clean break. The old ghosts still rattled their chains, and his lingering influence occasionally cast a cold shadow over Serena's heart. Yet, the effort was there. He was reaching for the light, and in this world, the attempt is everything. The winter chill had settled in when the phone rang. almost exactly 1 year after the scales of justice had finally tipped. Detective Morris's voice was gravelly on the other end. Gregory Vale was gone. A silent heart had stopped beating within the cold walls of a prison cell. Serena felt the air leave her lungs as she sank into a chair. She expected a surge of triumph, but there was only a vast, hollow silence. It is a strange thing to feel nothing when a monster dies. Blood is a heavy burden, even when it is tainted, Morris reminded her. You did what most wouldn't dare. You looked your tormentor in the eye and held him to account. That kind of grit is rare. After the line went dead, she sat in the heavy silence of her office, trying to map the new landscape of her life. The man who had tried to extinguish her light, the architect of her every nightmare, was finally just a ghost. She searched her soul for a flicker of sorrow or a wave of relief, but found only a numb, gray expanse. When Adrian arrived, he found her frozen in that same spot. The news hung in the air like smoke. My father is dead, she murmured. He took her hand, his presence a steady pulse against her skin. She confessed the void inside her. No joy, no closure, just a deafening sense of zero. There is no script for mourning a shadow, he whispered. He died in the isolation he earned, and a part of you knows that is justice. But another part, the part that broke her voice, still mourns the father who never existed, the one who should have been a shield instead of the blade. Adrian pulled her into the safety of his arms, his silence an acknowledgement of the tragedy of what should have been. The dam finally broke. She didn't weep for the man Gregory Vale was, but for the ghost of the father he failed to be. She grieved for the stolen innocence and the years consumed by the fire of fear. When the salt finally dried on her cheeks, the weight on her chest had shifted. The wounds weren't closed, perhaps they never truly would be, but the burden felt a little less impossible to carry. What can I do? He asked. I need to return to the mission, she replied, checking the clock for her next appointment. He worried she was burying the pain, but she knew better. The work was her medicine. Every woman who found safety within those walls reminded her why she had endured the inferno. She wiped away the traces of her tears and stood tall. The mourning could wait. The living could not. Forward is the only direction I have left, she said. Adrian nodded, a silent promise to be the net whenever she finally decided to fall. As the years turned, the shelter became a beacon, a blueprint for hope that stretched across the state. She penned her journey, not as a simple tragedy, but as a roadmap for those still lost in the dark, searching for a way home. The world listened, making her words a chorus that echoed far beyond her expectations. She and Adrian found a modest sanctuary of their own, a place defined by their shared peace rather than grandiosity. The question of children lingered in the air, a maybe that didn't need an answer yet. Meanwhile, Jackie walked back into the very hospital where she once arrived broken, but this time she wore the white coat of a healer. Maria transformed her life into the scent of fresh bread, opening a bakery that gave other survivors a place to start. Tanya reclaimed her mind and became a voice for the voiceless. Lisa welcomed a daughter named Hope, raising her within a sisterhood of strength. Yet the shadows claimed some. Not every path led to the light. Some returned to the fire, while others vanished into the cold unknown. There were battles lost to the demons of the past, addiction and broken minds that no walls could fully mend. But for every light that flickered out, many more burned brighter. 5 years after the first brick was laid, Serena stood amidst a sea of survivors and supporters. marking the anniversary of a miracle. The air was thick with the scent of second chances. The halls were overflowing with the ghosts of who they used to be and the vibrant women they had become. Marcus kept a watchful eye from the periphery, though the old threats had long since faded. Adrian remained in the shadows, his pride a quiet warmth focused entirely on her. Serena bypassed the microphone. She didn't need a speech when the evidence of their victory was breathing all around her. It was more than a structure. It was a living, breathing tapestry of resilience. One woman reaching for another, turning agony into a shared mission. A young girl, maybe 21, approached with a tremor in her voice and the fresh violet of a bruise marking her skin. "You are the one from the book, right?" she whispered, her resolve cracking. "I have run out of places to hide." Serena reached out, her touch a silent vow. "You've found the shore," she said softly. As she walked the newcomer through the sanctuary, she felt Adrian's gaze from across the room, a look of profound respect. She smiled back, a quiet recognition of her new reality. The path wasn't paved with ease, but every step now carried the weight of true meaning. She had crawled through the furnace and emerged not just whole, but forged in steel. From the ashes of her old life, she had built a legacy that would outlive her heartbeat. Her father's attempt to delete her existence had failed utterly. She was visible. She was significant. And every soul that crossed this threshold was a testament to the fact that no one is truly disposable. When the echoes of the celebration finally faded, she and Adrian retreated to the quiet of their home. She was drained, but it was the sacred exhaustion of a soul that had done its duty. "We did something real today," Adrian murmured as they pulled in. Inside, they didn't even make it to the bedroom, collapsing together on the sofa as the weight of the day finally caught up. She rested against him, the rhythm of his heart a lullaby. She thought back to the jagged edges of their beginning, wondering about the alternate realities that never came to be. "What if you had just settled the blood debt and walked away?" she asked. "What if we had remained strangers, cast out into different corners of the world?" "The past is a graveyard of things that didn't happen," he replied softly. "We are the only truth that matters." Serena let that sink in, the chaotic, beautiful collision of their lives. She reflected on the brutal work of healing and the messy, glorious architecture of a life reclaimed from the ruins. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. "I love you," she whispered into the twilight. His response was a soft echo of the same devotion. They drifted in the space between waking and sleep until Adrian suggested moving to the bed. "Let us stay right here," she murmured, too comfortable to break the spell. He pulled a heavy throw over them, sealing them in their own private world. Wrapped in his warmth, she finally felt truly home. The dawn would bring its own set of ghosts and battles, more women seeking an exit from the fire. But for these few hours, she was simply Serena, no longer a casualty or a statistic, but a woman who had wrestled her destiny from the shadows and won. She had found a diamond in the coal and refused to let it go. The man who sired her had sought her end, but here she was, vibrant and unyielding. The city outside continued its frantic pulse, a million stories unfolding under the neon. But in the quiet, Serena drifted off, anchored by Adrian's touch and the knowledge that Haven House stood as an eternal witness. She had transformed the sharpest pain into something of infinite beauty. The war was over. She had reclaimed the territory of her own soul. The victory wasn't flawless. The scars remained as permanent maps of the journey, but it was absolute. She was whole. She was free. And in the silence of the night, That was more than enough.